The third victim had just been found. Same position, same ritual objects, same pattern. Detective Marcus Rivera already knew it was no coincidence. The city's streets had become the stage for a methodical mind that transformed lives into macabre art. Statistics show that only 1% of homicides are committed by serial killers, but when they attack, they leave unmistakable marks. This is the case that changed criminal investigation protocols and exposed how society often fails its most vulnerable populations. Between 2007 and 2008, the streets of Portland witnessed the emergence of a predator who turned death into a meticulously choreographed performance. This was no ordinary killer. Have you ever noticed how we ignore certain crimes until they reach a standard that is impossible to deny? The first victims were treated as isolated cases, risks of the profession. Society systematically failed to protect those who lived on the margins. The uncomfortable question is, how many lives could have been saved if the first death had received the same attention as the third? This case exposes our prejudices, our tendency to prioritize the value of lives, and how this creates safe spaces for predators. Meanwhile, the ritualist continued his macabre performance, following a script that only a few could decipher. A disturbing truth about how our own negligence feeds monsters. What you will discover in this investigation goes beyond the common profile of a serial killer. There is one element that investigators have kept from the public for years, a detail that connects these deaths to an unsolved case from 2 decades ago. The obsession with patterns, the methodically executed signature, hides something deeper than just the desire to kill. And when we reveal the meaning behind this ritual, you'll understand why even the most experienced investigators were disturbed. A revelation that suggests these murders are merely the physical expression of a sick philosophy. The question that haunted Rivera every night: what really motivated this methodical predator? The answer will change your perception of evil. City of Portland, 2007. A booming metropolis where the glow of economic development created perfect shadows to hide monsters. The Riverside District, where neon lights colored damp streets and nightclubs coexisted with old tenements, became the chosen stage. Detective Rivera, 15 years of homicide experience, was known for his ability to see patterns where others saw only chaos. But this case would test his limits, because this time the killer wasn't just killing. He was communicating something through a macabre code that few could decipher. The city's air seemed thicker that autumn, as if foreshadowing the horror that was about to emerge from the shadows. The stage was set. The first victim, Elaine Davis, was found in a cheap hotel room. Initially, it seemed like a routine case of violence against sex workers. 3 weeks later, Sarah Mitchell in similar circumstances. But it was the third victim, Catherine Wilson, who raised the alarm. It wasn't just the methods or the profile of the victims, it was millimeter precision. The position of the hands, objects carefully arranged, the exact angle of the body, like a meticulously arranged art installation. Rivera realized he wasn't dealing with uncontrolled rage or chaotic hatred. It was something much more disturbing, a mind that turned death into a ritual. The predator had escalated his performance. What Rivera didn't know was that the true horror lay not just in what the killer did to his victims, but in the meaning behind each element of the ritual. The coded message he left in each scene, a message that would only be understood when connected to a forgotten case from the past, a case that Rivera himself had investigated at the beginning of his career. What connected these murders separated by 2 decades? And why did the killer seem to be speaking directly to him? The answer is far more disturbing than anyone could imagine. In the next scene, you will discover the first clue that this case goes beyond simple murder. Prepare to delve into the macabre ritual that terrorized Portland. All the victims shared more than profession. Age between 25-30 years, brown hair, medium height. They all worked independently, without protection. They had all recently arrived in the city. Rivera noticed the pattern as he turned the pages of the reports. The rough paper scratched his calloused fingers, while the strong aroma of cold coffee permeated the closed department room. Scattered photographs showed young faces, smiles frozen in identification documents, lives interrupted by someone who selected them with surgical precision. These were not random choices. They were auditions for a macabre show. The selection was deliberate, each criterion measured and considered. The victims were pieces in a larger puzzle. The scene was always the same. Bodies positioned as if in prayer, hands crossed over the chest, fingers interlaced with mathematical precision. The smell of lavender candles permeated the air, mixing with the metallic scent of dried blood. Small white stones formed a perfect circle around the body, always 7 stone, always equidistant. Rivera ran his fingers through his grey hair as he looked at the photos. His throat tightened as he noticed something no one had noticed, the barely visible marks on the victim's wrists, as if something had been removed after death, something the killer took as a souvenir, a ritual within a ritual. The level of detail suggested much more than obsession. He didn't use force. There were no signs of a struggle. Somehow he gained the victim's trust. Toxicology revealed mild, non-fatal sedatives. He wanted them conscious during the initial ritual. I wanted them to understand what was happening. The medical examiner, Dr. Chen, pointed to the inhalation marks on the lungs. He makes them inhale something first, something that leaves them conscious but paralyzed. His scalpel gleamed in the cool lights of the autopsy room as he demonstrated the insertion points. Then comes this incision, precise, professional. He has detailed anatomical knowledge. Rivera felt his stomach drop. The killer wasn't just methodical. He was trained. Someone with medical or forensic knowledge. 21 days. It was the exact interval between the murders. Not a day more, not a day less. Rivera marked the dates on the large calendar in the investigation room. His fingers trembled slightly as he connected the dots with red lines. The precision was disturbing. Cold sweat ran down his forehead as he calculated the next date. 3 weeks from Catherine Wilson. November 11th. There were exactly 9 days left. 9 days to find a methodical predator that made no mistakes. 9 days before another woman became part of his macabre ritual. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder, the sound amplified by the oppressive silence of the room. Tick-tock. Time running like blood. The countdown had begun. Rivera and his partner, Detective Sofia Mendez, combed through criminal records looking for similar patterns. The air in the archives room was heavy with the smell of old paper and forgotten memories. Dust danced in the beams of light that came in through the small, dirty windows. "Here," Mendez whispered. His voice carried the weight of discovery. A case from 1989. 3 women. Same ritual, same precision, same interval of 21 days. But then, as abruptly as it started, the murders stopped. The predator disappeared for almost 2 decades. Why? What brought him back? And the most disturbing discovery, the detective assigned to the original case was Rivera's mentor, the man who trained him. Something was wrong. The similarities were too perfect, as if the current killer had access to the original files, details that were never released to the public. Rivera felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The air in the department suddenly felt too cold, charged with an invisible presence. He was leafing through the old file when a newspaper clipping slipped to the floor. The headline, yellowed with age, "Decorated Detective Solves Riverside Case." The photo showed his younger mentor receiving a medal. In the background, partially visible, a familiar face observed the scene. Rivera gasped, her heart racing. It was a face he knew, a face I had recently seen. A face no one would expect to find connected to these murders. Psychiatric records revealed a disturbing pattern, narcissistic personality disorder combined with sadistic traits. But there was something more, distorted religious fixation. The killer did not see his actions as murders, but as transformation rituals. Ancient documents suggested he believed he was purifying his victims, preparing them for a higher plane. The forensic psychiatrist explained, "This type of ritualistic obsession is rare. The killer creates a universe of his own where his actions have sacred meaning. For him, each death was a carefully orchestrated ceremony. The level of detail suggested years of psychological preparation. He wasn't just a predator, he was an ideologue of horror. The predator did not match the stereotype. Ordinary appearance, possibly a respected position in the community. Investigations have shown that ritual stalkers often hide behind socially acceptable facades. They are masters of disguise, explained criminal profiler Dr. James Wilson. They don't want to be seen as different. Normality is their best camouflage. Witnesses describe someone who seemed professional, possibly a doctor or counselor, someone who went unnoticed on the streets, who was perhaps even known to the victims. The most terrifying possibility: he could be hiding in plain sight, actively participating in the investigation, questioning witnesses, offering help, observing the chaos he created. Forensic analysis of the rituals revealed surprising complexity. The objects left in the scenes had specific meaning. Lavender candles represented purification, white stones symbolized rebirth. The position of the bodies suggested a final pose of surrender or submission. Each element followed a specific order, like a carefully executed recipe. What disturbed investigators most? The subtle evolution between the murders. With each victim, the ritual became more elaborate, more personalized. "He's perfecting his technique," Rivera noted. "Every death is a rehearsal for something greater." The daunting question remained: what would be the final ritual? What was he preparing for? What did the killer consider his magnum opus? If the truth you just discovered impacted you, leave a like. It shows that you understand the criminal mind. The investigation revealed shocking connections to the 1989 case, not just similarities in methods, but physical clues that suggested a direct link. Partial DNA found on ritual objects matched ancient samples. But here the paradox arose. If the 1989 killer were still alive, he would be over 60 years old today. The witnesses' physical profiles did not match that of an older man. The most disturbing hypothesis emerged: what if it wasn't the same person, but someone trained by her? A pupil, a protégé, someone who had been initiated into the secrets of the ritual. The possibility of a predator lineage sent chills through the team. How many others could there be? Reassessing the files, the team discovered signs that had been overlooked, filed reports of suspicious behavior, reports of a man asking detailed questions about victims in bars and clubs, unusual purchases at occult and medical supply stores. Rivera felt his frustration growing. So many clues, so many unheeded warnings. A real estate agent reported a strange client interested in properties near the victim's roots. One florist mentioned regular orders of lavender candles to a specific address. Police had classified these reports as irrelevant until now. The predator profile was forming from the neglected fragments. He hid in plain sight. The breakthrough came when Mendez found a connection that no one had considered. The timings of the murders corresponded exactly to obscure ancient religious ceremonies, specifically rituals from a cult disbanded in the 1980s. A cult that his mentor, the late Detective Morrison, had heavily investigated before solving the 1989 case. Morrison's files contained details about these rituals that had never been shared with the department. Details that perfectly matched the current scenes. The terrible question arose: had Morrison actually solved the previous case, or had he merely created the illusion of resolution? And why did all the evidence point to someone with intimate access to their entire investigation? Examining the weeks before each murder, disturbing patterns emerged. All the victims had received anonymous gifts: flowers, perfume, cheap jewelry. Initially interpreted as gifts from clients, they now looked like markers. Red roses 3 days before each murder, Rivera noted, always accompanied by a card with a biblical phrase. The messages were always about redemption and purification. One of the victims had mentioned to a friend that she felt watched but protected. The psychology of the predator was more complex than they imagined. He didn't just hunt, he courted his victims. It established a perverse connection before the final act. Reviewing the reports, it became clear that several opportunities for intervention were wasted. A security camera captured a suspicious vehicle at 2 murder sites, but the report was filed as inconclusive. A night doorman described a man wearing medical gloves exiting a building near the first scene, but the tip was considered out of context. An emergency room doctor reported patient asking about specific sedatives. exactly those found in the victims. "We thought it was academic curiosity," admitted the professional. "The pieces were all there, waiting to be connected. Bureaucracy and assumptions cost precious lives." The case exposed serious systemic problems. Different jurisdictions did not share information efficiently. The department had no integrated system for crimes against sex workers. "They treated each case as isolated," Captain Henderson explained. "There was no protocol for identifying inter-district patterns. Limited resources meant prioritization of cases with high-profile victims. The Ritual Crimes Unit had been disbanded in 2005 due to budget cuts. Critical files were in obsolete format. The Predator counted on these flaws. He studied the system as meticulously as he studied its victims. The bureaucratic machine has become your involuntary ally. Crucial physical evidence went unnoticed in initial forensic analysis. Fibers found in the first scenes were catalogued but not analyzed due to budgetary priorities. Exotic pollen species on victims' clothing suggested a specific botanical source, but were ignored. Most crucial, metadata on anonymous photographs sent to journalists contained precise GPS coordinates. The technology existed to analyze them. The computer forensics expert was frustrated. No one thought to check. The killer unconsciously left digital signatures. His obsession with documenting rituals created an archive of untapped evidence, clues that could have led straight to him. Later interviews revealed a web of repressed knowledge. One social worker feared something was wrong, but didn't want to further stigmatize the profession. A local priest confessed that a parishioner had described disturbing fantasies involving saving fallen women, but confidentiality sealed it. Nightclub owners noticed customers asking detailed questions about specific female workers. Taxi drivers recalled passengers asking to circle certain areas repeatedly. Everyone felt something wrong, but no one wanted to be the alarmist. Fear of social judgment created a protective veil of silence around the predator, voices drowned out by stigma and systematic indifference. 2 days before Catherine Wilson's death, an anonymous call to the emergency center. A male voice described specific locations and methods that perfectly matched the murders. The call was classified as a hoax because the informant used language that was too technical to be credible. The recording was archived without investigation. Rivera listened to the tape with growing horror. The voice was calm, polite, almost pedagogical. "He was warning," Rivera whispered. "The killer was literally telling us where to find him." The terrifying realization: the predator wanted to be discovered. Not out of regret, but as part of his grand finale. The call was an invitation to the game, a game that started decades ago. In the attic of Morrison's house, Rivera discovered the impossible. A sealed box marked Phoenix Project. Inside, thousands of pages documenting not just the 1989 case, but elaborate theories about the cult, its rituals, and a list of potential successors. Photographs of alleged members included familiar faces, some circled in red marker. Morrison's personal diary revealed a growing obsession. "The leader escaped," he wrote, "but I found your acolyte school." In the last pages, frantic notes about infiltration and just one way to stop the bloodline. His handwriting deteriorated with anxiety. The last entry: "They know that I know. I must act first." The date: the day before his supposed suicide. Following a lead from the file, Rivera and Mendez investigated the hospital where Morrison spent his final months. Medical records showed treatment for severe paranoia, but interviews with staff revealed another story. "He wasn't delusional," confessed a retired nurse. "He was terrified. He said there was someone in the hospital learning his methods." The hospital had a residency program in forensic pathology where Morrison frequently gave lectures. List of residents at the time included names that would make Rivera freeze. One in particular, dedicated, charismatic resident, specialized in toxicology, known for asking detailed questions about death rituals, a student who, years later, practiced medicine in the metropolitan area. The investigation led Rivera to Dr. James Whitmore's office. On the surface, a respected psychiatrist specializing in trauma treatment. His credentials were impeccable, his practice prosperous. But subtle details bothered. Perfectly aligned diplomas hid holes in the wall, as if others had already been there. A specific scent of lavender wafted through the room. White crystal paperweights decorated the table. "I met Detective Morrison," Whitmore mentioned casually, watching Rivera catalogue the room. "A brilliant man. It's a shame the stress consumed him." His eyes studied Rivera intensely. "You have your eyes. Same intensity. Be careful not to follow the same path." The smile didn't reach his eyes. Digital analysis of Whitmore's computer, seized with a warrant, revealed encrypted files. It took experts 72 hours to decode them. The content confirmed the worst fears: photographs of all the victims weeks before their deaths, detailed documents of your movements, but most disturbing, videos of therapy sessions with patients in hypnotic states, where he practiced induction techniques that matched the methods used in the murders. Audio of sessions revealed subtle questions planting seeds about purification and transcendence. Correspondence with anonymous accounts on occult forums discussing perfecting ancient rituals. The professional facade hid a psychological laboratory of sadistic experimentation. His patients were guinea pigs for his real work. If you've seen signs like these in your life, write in the comments, "I saw this happen." Under interrogation, Whitmore maintained a disturbing composure. He admitted knowing the victims professionally, but denied involvement. "I was trying to save them," he insisted. "Social Darwinism is a natural force." Each response was measured, almost rehearsed. He demonstrated detailed knowledge of the rituals, but attributed it to academic research to understand pathologies. When faced with evidence, he changed tactics. Morrison got everything wrong. He saw conspiracies where there were only academic coincidences. Experts noted classic signs of a narcissistic personality: the need to feel superior, even in captivity. Most disturbing, references to other colleagues who shared similar interests. The investigation revealed not just a killer, but potentially a network. The search operation at Whitmore's residence was meticulously planned. 04:00, when sleep is deepest. Tactical team silent as early morning fog. The Victorian home in Laurelhurst contained a modified basement. Symbols marked on the walls. A current diary documenting plans for a final ceremony on November 11th, exactly the date Rivera had predicted. Personal belongings of all victims carefully preserved in numbered bottles. More frightening, a list of 12 future candidates with photos, addresses, and detailed routines. The fourth victim would be the most important. The ritual would evolve into something transcendent. Whitmore was found sleeping in the library surrounded by ancient texts about death rituals. His arrest broke a cycle that had lasted decades. When the news broke, shockwaves ripped through Portland. Dr. Whitmore was not only a respected doctor, he was a counselor for several programs for at-risk women. Patients panicked when they realized they had confided their deepest traumas to the very predator who hunted women like them. "I told you everything about when I worked the streets," cried one patient. "I thought I was being helped." Fundamental trust in the medical system was shaken. Mental health professionals faced an ethical dilemma: how to continue helping when the field itself had been perverted. Rivera saw the collapse of faith in institutions that were supposed to protect the vulnerable. The trauma spread like an invisible virus. The women who survived Whitmore's advances struggled with guilt and retrospective terror. A reformed prostitute who had been his patient. "He helped me get off the streets just so he could kill others like me." Recurring dreams tormented those who now understood that they had escaped death by millimeters. Victims' families were dealing not just with loss, but with the brutal betrayal of a system they were supposed to protect. Sisters who had been his patients questioned every interaction. How many times was I alone with him? What did he really know about me? The weight of survivors' guilt was mixed with the horror of having trusted the predator. Therapy became necessary to overcome therapy, a poisoned healing cycle. Whitmore's discovery created a systemic crisis of trust in Portland. Mental health clinics have seen a drastic drop in demand, especially from women. Sex workers have become even more isolated, fearful of seeking medical or psychological help. Rivera noted the cruel irony. The predator, even in prison, still controlled lives through the fear he planted. Victim support organizations reported an increase in panic attacks whenever patients needed to enter doctors' offices. The Riverside district became a ghost place after sunset. Business owners complained about the drop in nighttime traffic. The economy of distrust has taken hold. Fear has become the city's new currency. Whitmore had planted seeds of paranoia that would flourish for years. The detectives who worked the case bore invisible scars. Rivera developed severe insomnia, waking up with a start to visions of Whitmore's diaries. Mendez requested a transfer after months of recurring nightmares. Coroner Dr. Chen had to take leave when she discovered she had made medical appointments with Whitmore for her teenage daughter. Relentless questions haunted her. Was my daughter safe with him? What did he really see when he examined children? The entire department went into group therapy. Investigative protocols were redesigned to include regular psychological assessments for distressed case teams. The human cost of hunting monsters has finally been recognized. Unsung heroes sacrificing their sanity to protect society. The trials dragged on for a year. Whitmore's defense exploited technical loopholes. Digital evidence obtained with questionable warrants. Psychiatric testimony competed, some declaring him a calculating sociopath, others suggesting dissociative disorder. Victims' families suffered re-victimization in court. Defense lawyers questioned the victim's lifestyle, suggesting acceptable risks of the profession. Rivera testified for 8 hours, reliving each horrific discovery. The defense's strategy: plant doubts about the connection between the rituals and Whitmore, suggesting that evidence had been planted by Morrison years ago. Justice metamorphosed into a theatrical performance where truth fought against technicalities. On March 5, 2009, the verdict: guilty on all counts, 3 first-degree murders, evidence of planning for a 4th. Assassination attempt. Psychological torture. Judge Rebecca Thompson read the sentence in a controlled but trembling voice. 3 sentences of life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole, to be served consecutively. Whitmore showed no emotion. His eyes scanned the courtroom, memorizing faces as he still catalogued potential victims. As he was taken away, he murmured to Rivera, "How many more do you think there are? We learned the same rituals." A shiver ran down Rivera's spine. Even incarcerated, Whitmore had planted his last seed of fear. Justice had been served, but the horror would persist. Following the discovery of Whitmore's list of future candidates, an emergency operation was mobilized. Rivera coordinated Operation Shield, protecting the 12 identified women without alerting potential accomplices. Teams distributed in strategic locations. 24/7 surveillance started discreetly. The pressure was overwhelming. Each could be the next target if Whitmore had partners. Rivera didn't sleep for 3 days. Coffee became a substitute for blood in his veins. Each woman had a detailed profile: routines, addresses, vulnerabilities. How did he get so much information? Mendez asked as they set up protection schemes. The team discovered that Whitmore had used access to medical databases. Digital privacy had betrayed the victims. Digital investigation of Whitmore's devices revealed encrypted communications with 3 other users. FBI mobilized cyber unit to trace contacts. Mirror server in Toronto masked real IPs. Engineers worked tirelessly to break encryption. Finally, 2 accounts belonged to medical professionals, 1 to a university professor. They all shared an interest in anthropology of death and cultural ritualism. Recovered chat file contained discussion about improving traditional methods and rescuing ancestral practices. One of the doctors, a pediatrician in Florida, kept a file of interesting subjects in his practice. Professor had a collection of artifacts from disbanded cults. Hunting expanded nationally. New generation of ritual psychopaths using modern medicine to practice ancient horror. FBI created fake online profile to attract suspects. Undercover agent assumed the identity of a researcher interested in rituals of transcendence. Messages meticulously crafted to trigger revealing responses. Pediatrician took the bait. We have methods to identify ideal candidates from childhood. Psychological markers are detectable early. Meeting was set up in Baltimore. SWAT discreetly surrounded cafe. When the doctor arrived with a laptop containing detailed records of 200 children, the realization of how vast the network was hit the team like a wave of nausea. Arrest was carried out without incident, but in the computer screening, terrifying discovery. Plans for a conference where initiates would meet masters of the discipline. The network was bigger than they imagined. Forensic analysis revealed planned date and location. Alternative Medicine Conference in Las Vegas, 3 weeks away. Initial list of 47 special participants identified. Unprecedented interstate operation was mounted. FBI, local police and federal forces from multiple jurisdictions coordinated. Hotel was infiltrated with covert agents. Discreet surveillance system installed. The challenge: distinguishing legitimate participants from predators. Rivera flew to Las Vegas to coordinate. Insomnia and paranoia intensified. Every face in the casino seemed familiar. Every glance held a threat. He knew that one false move would alert the entire network. 47 potential predators, each expert at masking their true nature behind professional respectability. On the morning of the third day of the conference, signs converged. Group of 12 individuals held a closed meeting in a luxury suite. Surveillance equipment captured conversations about optimal subject selection and silencing protocols. Warrants were executed simultaneously in the suspect's suite and residences. Seizure revealed mobile library of texts on ritual sacrifice, forensic anatomy, and trauma psychology. Rivera led the way into the master suite. What he found exceeded his worst expectations. Mock-ups of 3 different ritual rooms, each more elaborate than the Whitmore murders. Positioned mannequins demonstrated precise angles. Diagrams detailed anatomical points for preservation of consciousness. Maps highlighted ideal hunting zones in 15 cities. In the following weeks, 31 arrests were made in 7 countries. Each detainee kept meticulous files, classification systems for potential victims, and maps of unprotected areas. Interrogations revealed hierarchy: 3 masters, 12 initiates, 16 apprentices. Whitmore was classified as an initiate, with aspirations to become a master. International connections shocked the agencies. Pediatricians who selected promising subjects, psychologists who planted seeds of vulnerability, coroners who advised on the preservation of specimens. Systematic horror that used medical credentials to access and exploit victims. Rivera realized they had discovered not just a predator, but an entire academy of horror. Medicine perverted to serve sick fantasies of power over life and death. Continue uncovering the darkest secrets of the criminal mind. Sign up and be part of the investigation. The Whitmore case catalyzed fundamental changes in medical and investigative protocols. Access to medical records has undergone complete review. Nationally integrated database to track patterns in seemingly unrelated deaths created. Continuing education programs have expanded to include identifying peers with predatory behavior. In-depth psychological screening has become mandatory for professionals with access to vulnerable populations. Rivera was asked to lead the National Training Initiative. Doctors, lawyers, educators, any profession that grants power over others needs constant vigilance, he emphasized in seminars. The case highlighted how positions of trust can be exploited by methodical predators. Repercussions crossed borders. Canadian police identified similar cells based on recovered files. Scotland has reopened 15 cases with ritual similarities. Australia discovered network of 8 medical professionals obsessed with applied anthropology of death. European Union established specialized task force. Connections revealed between obscure medical conferences and local spikes in ritual killings. Interpol created a database dedicated to systematic predators in trusted professions. Global awareness has emerged. Modern predators don't wear masks or bloody knives. They wear white coats and diplomas. They hunt not in the shadows, but under fluorescent lights in hospitals and offices. The camouflage of professional respectability has become a target of scrutiny. Sex workers' rights advocates used the case to push for legal reforms. If these women had had employment rights and access to police protection, perhaps 3 lives would not have been lost, argued lawyer Sarah Chen. Legalization and regulation have gained momentum. mobile medical clinics created specifically for marginalized populations, mandatory check-in systems implemented, security apps designed with a direct panic button for emergencies, education about signs of methodical predators became part of the training. Whitmore would never have had access to his victims in a system that protects them as it protects other workers, Rivera told a congressional hearing. Change of perspective, from victims to workers deserving of protection. Rivera collaborated with psychologists to create a universal protocol. Danger signs in trusted professionals. Widely distributed checklist included excessive interest in personal details, questions about vulnerabilities, unsolicited gifts, meetings outside the professional environment, unnecessary documentation, detailed knowledge of personal routines. If something looks slightly off, it probably is, the guide emphasized. Case studies based on Whitmore taught pattern recognition. Trust Your Gut campaign launched nationally. Confidential hotline established to report suspicions about professionals. In the first 6 months, 23 real risk situations were identified. Knowledge became power. Surveillance informed the first defense. 10 years later, Rivera testified before the Institutional Reform Commission. This case showed that the modern monster does not lurk in dark alleys. He sits behind office desks, trustworthy and polite. He used medical knowledge as a weapon and respectability as an invisibility cloak. Resulting reforms included mandatory rotation of doctors treating sensitive cases, recording of all consultations involving vulnerable patients, mentoring system with multi-professional transparency. We need to protect as much as we trust, Rivera concluded. The case entered criminology textbooks as a definitive example of a modern systematic predator. Universities incorporated study into medicine, law, and criminal psychology courses. In 2019, Rivera retired from the police force, but not from the mission. He founded an institute dedicated to studying and preventing systematic predation. My mentor Morrison perhaps knew much more than he has documented, but his paranoia consumed him. I choose differently, to share all we have learned. Institute trained 5,000 security professionals in methodological predator identification. He published 15 studies on the psychological patterns of these criminals. Most importantly, it managed to detect and prevent 7 similar cases through an early warning system. In the last statement of this report, Rivera sits in his office, looking at photos of the victims he was unable to save. Every lesson learned in blood must be converted into protection for others. This is how we honor those we have lost. In the next video, I will reveal the even more disturbing case that no one dares to discuss. Brace yourself, because the truth is darker than you imagine.